All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for the support session related to the Digital Learning Coach Grant. Uh, Very excited to do this. We did one a couple weeks ago about the Digital Learning Grant, and these are similar in name but serve different purposes. So we have one of our DLCs, Brenny, here to kind of talk us through what this grant means and some specifics related to it. And she's done a great job putting together some information for us this afternoon. So, Brenny, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I feel like I know some of you on this call. So for those of you who I've not met before, my name is Brenny Coomer. I'm a digital learning coach for Keep Indiana Learning. I'm also the assistant tech director in Bartholomew Consolidated Schools in Columbus, Indiana, where I kind of am a tech coach amongst other things, as I feel like most of us are who work in the world of tech. You wear a lot of different hats. And I'm super excited to be talking about some tips and things that have been helpful to me over the years as we've applied and looked at some of these different grants and giving you some ideas for brainstorming. And also, if you have ideas that you want to share with the group too, I would love to talk. I know that as more of these grant opportunities have been graciously given to us by the IDOE, it's been helpful to talk with other people in other districts and get their ideas. And I know it sparked some of my own creativity and how I've thought differently about the grant. So we're going to start off first by just sharing some different resources. So Ryan, do you want me to share my screen? Is that going to be easier?
Yeah, probably. I just realized that I was sharing mine, so that would be great. I'll cancel this and you can go ahead and share yours.
Yeah. All right. Let me get this pulled up. I've been on Google Meet like all day and it's like slightly different that I almost just went to the wrong place to share my screen and picked the wrong one. All right, there we go. And I did just add a bit.ly as well on the first few slides if you just joined us. All right, so a couple of links and things to know right off the get-go. These are all embedded on this presentation. So first piece is making sure that you look over the grant memo, which contains the different focus strands or priorities for the grant. I probably shouldn't call it strands because they're moving away from that lingo. We're calling it priorities now, but that's pretty much what it is, just slightly different vernacular. The application is linked there. It's a jot form if you've not used that before. It's nice that it saves your work, but I do have some tips related to that I'll get to here in a bit. There is an info session that the DOE hosts for every single one of the grants that they put out there. I would totally recommend watching that, keeping that link there. I did have some issues on my work Google account, I will say, accessing that link. They've put it on the application. I think my Google domain settings in my district were blocking my ability to watch that. So I actually sent it to a personal email and watched it from there. So if you get an error message saying that it couldn't display that content, it's your Google settings. It's not the actual video itself. So you might forward it to a personal email or personal device and pull it up there. So I actually watched it on my phone because my computer was being a little wonky. I did email the DOE and ask them if they're going to put that in the Learning Lab, and I haven't heard back yet, but they do have past session helpful brainstorming pieces in the Learning Lab if you wanted to check there. If you have not gotten a grant before, I do recommend that you also share that recording with anyone in your finance and budget office, just because they go over some of those super important details, and it's helpful to have those people in the know and on your side from the beginning versus afterwards coming to them with a bunch of receipts and being like, hey, so I just bought all this stuff, reimburse it. They like to be in the know a little bit earlier so they can plan. And then the last link I have on here is a recording from different success stories from different corners of the state that have gotten grants and those school districts talking about projects that they have done. The recording link I have here isn't necessarily specific to the coaching grant. It's actually for the digital learning grant, the bigger bucket of money, but there are some specific pieces shared in that video that talk about PD that I think could be applicable to what you want to do with this grant. There's some really good stuff shared in that one. There's actually two in the Learning Lab. I found this one to be super helpful, so I thought I would put that there for you as a resource. So first thing is that this grant is really focused on professional development and helping you grow and become an amazing coach and share your knowledge with other people in your district and even beyond that. So there's a lot of different things that you can use this grant money for certifications. If you want to be like a Canvas certified educator, you can go and do that. And it can pay for that coursework. It can pay for course enrollments, coursework as well. So it can't pay for graduate credits or schooling in that sense. But if you enroll in an online course, like I know someone in our district last year that was a part of this grant with me that got it, she really wanted to learn more from Elena Aguilar, who does a whole amazing series on the art of coaching. And she did that coursework and it was amazing. And what's great is that she shared all the resources with me. So then I got to learn that stuff too. So it can do that. It can also pay for conference registration, in-state, out-of-state, and the related travel associated with that. So really the world is your oyster when it comes to what professional development this can fund. And I would really encourage you to think of different things than even just the ones I have listed. Think about really how can I learn individually and then share that expertise so it has a wider impact with people in my district, and that'll help set your grant apart from others. There are a few priorities, and this is the strand piece I was talking about, to keep in mind on your application. So the big three that they're going to be looking for and evaluating your application on are artificial intelligence, blended and virtual coaching cycles, and then lastly, digital integration and coaching cycles just related to digital learning models. So if you're a virtual school, that could be really exciting for you. If you support teachers in that type of setting, really all of these would be applicable. Last year, they had a couple other focus strands, like UDL used to be one, but now they've kind of shifted that. But if you still want to do work on UDL, they do have an other line on this that you can specify, like we've had some momentum before, we're doing some other work, we want to continue to do that. So we're not going to penalize you if you don't focus on these three. These three will certainly help your application, but if you have other things you want to include, go for it and write that in and explain why those are priorities as well. I think honestly, the more information you can share on your application to give a clear picture of what you're trying to do, the better off that you will be. Okay. There's not virtual reality on this particular priority like there was in the digital learning grant, to answer the question in the chat. But if you are wanting to do that, that could technically be an other piece that you wrote in.
And Brenny, I'll add to that. At the top of the application, it says priority will be given to these three topics, but you can select more than one, right? So it might be advantageous to decide on one of those three, and then in your other, have one of those other topics that you're looking to dive in on.
Yep, I would agree with that 100%. And maybe I tend to be long-winded, and I'll try not to be that way on this call today. But on my application, I almost always go for multiple strands, because if you are doing work in AI, chances are you're probably gonna have to do some coaching on what that could look like in a blended and virtual environment. They all tie in together really well. And if you can make those connections, the better off your application is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Other type of tidbits here before we get into more of the nuts and bolts on what that application actually looks like. So the maximum amount of money that you can request in this grant is $10,000, but there are some pieces to be mindful of. You only have to submit one application for your whole district. So if you're the lucky chosen one that's going to do that for multiple people, then hooray, I'm right there with you. I'm always the one who has to go and hunt down signatures and get it going. And I kind of like the excitement behind it, but only one of them has to be submitted, but it can be for multiple people. So if you have multiple tech coaches in your district, they can all be written into this grant. Maximum number you can request is 10,000. $5,000 maximum per coach. So if you have someone who wants to go to a conference and is going to use more of that 5,000, then maybe 3 or 4 other people are doing coursework or something else. But just know that you can't spend more than $5,000. If you are the only person that's going to be funded through this grant, unfortunately, you don't get the $10,000. You can't request that. The max you can get is 5. So if you have people in your district who support you, I would almost recommend teaming up on this versus just going at it solo. Other piece is just the application process. Again, just one person has to submit it. And I would make sure that you have a plan in place on who is going to do that and be collaborating and communicating with each other a lot up until the day that this grant is due, so that you're not stressed and trying to write in things last minute and it's all polished and ready to go. All right, so here's some of the pieces that I'm going to touch on lightly, but I will say you have more clarifying questions on what things this can be spent on, per diem, all of that jazz. I really would recommend that you watch the recording and then also email Mary Carnahan who is on that recording and answers all the questions related to this grant, because I know some of it, but I'm also not the person from the state who ultimately has to sign off on everything. And I don't want to give you any information that has changed from when they made that recording or if there's any adjustments. So your funds can be used for professional learning, conferences, courses, and travel. The travel piece, it's really helpful if you try to if you really look at what prices are right now and give it as much accuracy as you can in that moment. Now, some of these conferences and things, maybe the conference just happened and the website doesn't say what the price is going to be for that conference for the time that you could go through this grant. I would historically look at what the price was last year. If you know someone who went last year, ask them, and then maybe add like $50 to it for, the fun of inflation and stuff like that, just so you have a little bit of a buffer. I always go onto the different airline websites and look at prices if I need to, because it can pay for out-of-state travel and flights and get a guesstimate on what that is. Same thing with hotels. Chances are, if you're going to a hotel out of state, they probably have a conference rate, which is slightly discounted for the conference. But I always usually like to look and see, okay, what's the maximum amount of money that this could be if I don't have that conference rate in case I sign up late or it's not as much of a discount is what I need. Obviously, don't go and say like, it's going to cost $5,000 for me to go to this one conference and that's just the hotel, because that's probably not what it's going to be. So don't inflate it too much, but really do some of your research and look at the conference websites to get information. For this grant, technically you can give people stipends with this grant money if it's work outside of their usual contract hours, but you can't pay any fringe benefits with this money. So if you give people stipends, it can't include anything like benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, retirement, all of that stuff. If you have questions about that, if you have a title money person in your district, or if you have a budget person, they're going to know exactly what you need to do for that criteria. But if you write that in and that money is trying to be spent on those different pieces, it's going to take a lot of time to get your grant approved and your district reimbursed. So just a little bit of advice there. And that's just a rule with that state money. Travel, again, make it on real numbers. For in-state travel and conferences and hotel stays, there are specific amounts that they will reimburse you for. So if you go over that, you're basically going to eat some of that cost. So be mindful of that. And then the grant cycle always has a final day that you have to encumber your funds. So I always think that word is fun to say, encumber your funds. Whenever I get that email, I'm always like, ooh, that sounds so fancy. It's basically spend your money by this day or it's gone. And you'll also have a little bit of time afterwards to get reimbursements for that grant. So like a lot of the other digital learning grants that are out there, they are entirely reimbursement-based grants. So that's why it's really important that you go and you talk to your finance people, because you're going to be spending some money before you technically really have that money to spend. So that's why it's always nice to go and like bribe them with chocolate and talk with them and say, hey, like this is happening. I always go and I say like, thank you so much, a million thank yous for all of your help with this money. And the last thing is, if you do need to make any changes to your grant once it's approved and funded, you realize like, well, maybe this conference isn't happening anymore. It did in years past, but they've canceled it or changed it. You can change your grant, but there are specific deadlines that they'll share with you on when you have to have those adjustments made, and being mindful of those is just always super helpful. And if you receive the grant, they include all of that in emails to you, and they send very regular updates, so you're always in the know. And then the team is just super easy to get in contact with. All right, so speaking of money, here is the spreadsheet that you're going to need to do this grant. I'm going to put this in the chat for you. So that's your fun spreadsheet. You can convert it to a Google Sheet if you're a Google district. It's technically in an Excel format at the moment, but you will have to save it as an Excel file. And it's very particular in how you have to fill it out. So this is something that's a non-negotiable on your grant. You have to fill out this spreadsheet. So really look over it, have your finance person give it a once over before you submit it, just so you have multiple eyes on it. I always like to look through it and do my math on like my own spreadsheet off to the side to make sure that they match up and they're correctly calculating the amount of money, but it has to be filled out. And there is a separate tab on there now for travel. That's something that's a change than what it was in years past. If you've done the digital learning grant application for this year, then you're probably familiar with that, because that was something they separated. In the past, it was all kind of together and it was a little tricky to keep track of. And now they've separated it out, which has been very nice for this go around. Another change, because I know some of the people on this call have gotten this grant before. Before, there was a maximum of only 2 people in your district that could get this grant. Like they were very specific on that, and now it's not. So there's the maximum of $5,000 per one person, but you can put 5, 6, 7, however many coaches you want into this grant if you need to do that, which is a change from prior years. So here are my tips for success in doing this. Do your research on travel. And if you're doing in-state travel, really watch that reporting and figure out what the maximum dollar amount is for hotel stays, what my per diem can be, and what they'll reimburse me for, because you don't want to have to be eating some of that cost yourself or your district, because it's not super fun to go through those pieces and not have a plan in place for that. You can apply for this grant if you've gotten it before. I do think they're giving priority to districts that have never gotten it, which, you know, that's cool and that's okay. But if you've gotten it before, you can apply again. And I would just recommend that if you're applying again, maybe come up with something that's a little bit different than what you've done before, a new project or a new focus, and specify why this is more unique or different than some of the other things you've done historically, or how it can build up your existing knowledge base from other grants that you have received. These are some of my like organizational tidbits for success that I've kind of learned over the years and doing these grants and some other ones. The job form is nice in that it's a grant application that it can save. It sends you an email that it saves, and there's a link that you can go back and access it. But I don't trust technology, maybe, is what it is. I've been burned too many times by typing like an essay for a class and then it disappears, or I lose internet and all my work is gone. I always copy all of the grant questions into a Google Doc. So I have it there. That is my working copy. I share it with the other people who are going to be signing off on this grant, who are my budget people, and who's, you know, maybe getting this grant going with me, whether it's other coaches or people I'm going to involve on this. So I like that, because whenever it is time for you to actually go and submit your grant, you just copy your answers to those questions. And then it's so satisfying because they're all there and you're done. You've already done all the work. So that's my tidbit of advice, is put the questions elsewhere and use that as a running working copy with your team. And then just share it with your team. If you have someone who is going to be really good at tackling a question about how your district uses a learning lab to support teachers, then they answer that question. And maybe you answer another one, you proofread each other's sections so it sounds a little bit more unified. You don't have to do all of the questions yourself. It's kind of nice to divide and conquer and then come together and review it. All right. Again, just talk to your budget people. I kind of said this earlier, but I want to drive that point home. It's good to keep them in the loop so they know. One of them has to be listed on the application from your budgeting department, and they actually get a lot of the initial emails related to this grant. So it's helpful to tell them that before they get these random emails and they're like, what is this? Delete. You're like, that was my grant. Don't delete it. So just keep them in the know. And then also just schedule a time, whether it's with your superintendent's admin assistant, or you have you email them regularly or talk to them regularly. They do have to sign off on your application. It's the last little space on the application itself. So don't wait until the final day, 4:55, 5 minutes before the application is due, to do that, because your superintendent's probably anywhere and everywhere in the district, especially this time of year. So I would make sure that you were on your superintendent's calendar before then, so that they can be in the know. Maybe you share your plan with this person beforehand until you have time for them to sign off on it. I think our superintendent is probably sick of me being like, so I need you to sign off on this, but it's helpful to schedule a meeting just so he's not totally blindsided, or I don't find him in the parking lot. Not that I've done that before, to sign something before it's due. The last one was due during our spring break, and he happened to come in to grab something, and I was like, I need you to sign this right now. So lesson learned on that one. Don't wait until the final minutes. And then the rubric. So all of the grant applications are evaluated by the digital learning team through a specific rubric. So I'm going to share that there. And that's really what Ryan was referencing earlier when he said that these are the grant topics that are going to be given priority if your grant touches on these pieces. And it does say that on this rubric. So that's why it's helpful that you align with at least one. And then if you have other aims for your grant, maybe try to weave those into those different priorities. And I would also just say, get feedback from someone who maybe isn't a coach themselves on your grant application to see if this makes sense. We have a title coordinator here who does a lot of grant writing herself. So I love to go and talk to her on this because she's good experience, and just say, does this make sense? It's going to align with some things that you see as priorities in the district. And she really gives helpful feedback. So having someone look over it, whether it's a principal or someone else, is just always nice to have that fresh perspective. And maybe they'll give you some ideas that you hadn't thought of that could be exciting things to put into your application itself. So moving forward, now we're going to talk about some ideas. And this is also certainly a time where you can share some ideas for what you plan to do with this grant. So if there's one other piece of advice I would say is to think big. You are certainly, wonderful in your district and you do great things, but think beyond your personal role and how you can expand your learning to reach as many people in your district as possible. So when you go to a conference, there's so many things that you can learn. How can you share that out so that teachers know about it, principals know about it, everyone can benefit from you attending that conference? And I would also say think big in that this grant can certainly fund PD for you as a learning coach, but what are some different ways that you can fund learning for other people through this grant? So, maybe you go into attend a conference and you see a session by an author, and this can fund book studies related to that. So other people in your district can have copies of that book. Or you purchase access to an online portal where all of your instructional coaches can have access to that. And a requirement is maybe that they share some of their learning with the teachers in their building in those trainings. So if there's any tip I would give you, it's think how you can get this out to as many people as possible and try to articulate that into your grant as often as you can. So here are some ideas that I've seen on other people's applications, my applications, and different things in the past. So I've kind of pulled some different examples. So shameless plug, I am on this conference committee, so I have to put it up here, partly because of that. But also, it's going to be a great conference. You could write this into your grant, and if you do write the Indiana Connected Educators Conference, which is in October of this year, into your application, you will have your grant money by then, so that's great. But you'll also lock in early bird pricing, even though the early bird window has already passed. So it'll save you $20 a person, which is nice because then you can use that $20 a person to do other exciting things with your grant. So I do have the conference website linked on my slides if you want to check it out. And we do have sessions that align with all of the grant strands. So AI, blended learning, virtual learning, coaching cycles, all of that jazz. And I know there's some people on this call who will probably be presenting some of those sessions at said conference. So maybe, you're not going to have to write this in for yourself to attend, but maybe colleagues. So fun things there. I would recommend considering that. And then there is a free coach conference the day before. So if you want to stay overnight, this could pay for your hotel room, especially if you're traveling from far away. Other ideas and conferences to attend. The FETC conference is in January of every single year. It's usually in Florida, minus the one year that it was in New Orleans. It's back in Florida again for the next few years. That could be an opportunity. They have tons of different conference strands at that conference, including AI, including assistive tech, blended learning, leadership, admin ones. So this could be a good way if you have other ideas for your grant. This conference has a lot of variety in the sessions and focus. So there could be something in there for everyone. Other ones, just ISTE and ACSD is a good one. That's in the summer. So you want to worry about paying for subs on that because it's in the summer and most of the time people are out of school at that moment. In structure, if you're a Canvas district, the Q conference in California, which is in Palm Springs. HEC conference. I know Tim's on here. Tim's on the HEC board. Oh, he's even wearing his HEC shirt. Look at him. Yes, represent. You can write that one in. It's amazing. It's in Indy. It's in November. One of my favorite conferences. And there's a little bit of something on there for everyone. And I'm sure they're going to have topics and presentations on all of the different priority strands for this grant. I've never attended this one, but the Michigan conference as well. I've heard amazing things on that. I feel like I saw a lot of people talking about awesomeness on Twitter for that one. So that's not super far away. It's in Detroit next year. I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but I feel like it's in the spring. Maybe. I could be totally wrong, but I feel like it's in the spring. So that could be one you could look at, and the travel costs won't be a ton for that because it's only one state away, unless you're in the south part of the state like me, a little bit more of a drive, but it's doable. And then TCEA, I did not go to that, and I had serious FOMO this year because I feel like everyone else did. So I know Tim went, and it looked like it was super fun. Few other people did. So that's another one that you can write in. And they already have some of their pricing pieces published on their website. So if you wanted to get really accurate numbers, those are there. Or you can talk to some people who went last year to guesstimate some of those pricing pieces too. So conferences can certainly be an avenue, but there are some other ways that you can use this money. You can certainly do coaching courses, like Catlin Tucker has some really nice courses that you can buy that are asynchronous, or you can do live ones. And the nice thing about the asynchronous ones is you have access to it for like over a year. So you can always go back and reference it, use it to plan out your PD for the year. And the cool thing with those coaching courses is historically, they're not quite as expensive as going to a conference. So you can buy it for multiple people in your district if you needed to. And my bit of advice is if you pay for people to use a tool or to attend a conference or something, maybe write into your application that a follow-up to them attending is that they have to do a training the district level or at the school level to share their learning, just so you broaden the scope of what you're doing. Other ones, book studies. There's just a few on here that I listed. I know some of these are super popular, some of the people who are on this call already, but that's kind of a thing that I've written into this grant in the past because we've had a lot of success with book studies, is a way for us to take this beyond just the scope of tech coaches in our district is to do a book study where the instructional coaches also help me plan those sessions and all of the teachers can attend. And the teachers love when they get a copy of the book paid for them through the grant money versus them having to go buy the books themselves. And teachers just love book studies, especially if you do it in the summer and you like do it at a coffee shop. Super fun. We did that one time and it was like, we actually had so many people there. I had to do it multiple times because we maxed out the capacity of the Starbucks where I was having it. And I'm like, I'm so sorry that there's so many people here and you're having to kick people out of the store, but that's an option as well. And then just certification courses. So several, Canvas has certification if you're a Canvas district. 5-Star has a lot of Google certification cohorts, and there's been ISTE certification options through Keep Indiana Learning as well, if that's an interest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Brenny, I love the book study idea. I think it's fantastic. And I'm with you that I know as a teacher, I always enjoyed a book study. And you're right. When someone else buys the book, it's that much better.
If it's like free things.
Yeah, exactly. Free stuff. So we do have options with Keep Indiana Learning that would fit well into this grant. That QR code right there will take you to a copy of the document that's on the next page that I'll get into. But we do a lot of professional development sessions on a variety of things. But obviously, for the purpose of this grant, we've put together a couple offerings that kind of make sense. The one that I really want to highlight, especially for this grant, is the Digital Learning Leadership Cadre. So that'll be 5 sessions throughout the year that focus on different pieces of digital learning. It'll be presented by myself along with some of our DLCs, our digital learning coaches. So people that are in the field doing this on a daily basis, talking about these topics that are incredibly important. You can see there how it's kind of broken down, but we have innovative technologies, student engagement, effective online and blended learning, creating inclusive learning environments, and then building digital citizenship and safety. Within those, you can see some of the topics that'll be in there: AI, Flip, Nearpod, Canvas, UDL, all of those kind of things that kind of weave in and out of education today. So to participate in the full 5 sessions would be $500 per person there. So, as Brenny was mentioning, is $5,000 per coach. This can definitely just be in there as part of it, and you get 5 full days throughout the year of that support. And really, if you've not been a part of a cadre model like this, it really goes a long way in developing that ongoing support where, yes, we'll meet 5 days, but there's going to be communications in between. There's going to be relationships that extend beyond the cadre. It's just a really good way to start developing that network of support. Some of the other things that are on the right there are additional sessions that we'll have related to the cadre, but not necessarily need to be a part of it. So you could do the leveraging EdTech for STEAM education, or you could do professional learning networks without being a part of the cadre, but we kind of see it as best to do cadre, and then maybe if you can attend those, to work those in as well. We also have, lastly, some of these in-school supports that we're working on. I know the AI strategy is a big topic right now. We're all kind of reckoning with how AI is going to fit into our school systems. So we've partnered with some organizations to develop a framework for AI that we feel pretty strongly as a great starting point for school leaders and digital coaches to begin the discussion and start to piece together, okay, using a framework, how do I make it work for my school, my district? and we can partner with you on that and make it a more enjoyable experience than what it might be otherwise. I'm not going to say an enjoyable experience because if we're talking about policies, that's hard to do. Um, and then the last one there is creating a culture of universal design. So taking the concepts of UDL and applying that to a school-wide, district-wide culture of accessibility. So not just choice boards, but what does that mean for our school culture and our school climate? And we can work through what that looks like. But lots of options that fit really, really well with the not strands. Forget the word that was used. Topics, not
Priorities.
priorities. Thank you. With the priorities in the grant. So happy to provide you with whatever you might need for that. But those documents are available to everybody.
Thank you. So tons of ideas. And I just realized that I had another idea that I didn't put on my slide. If you do a book study, or if you really want to bring in a speaker who's an expert on a topic, that can also be PD for this grant as well. So if you do a book study with Catlin Tucker or Katie Novak's book, why not have them come in and talk? Some of them will do that without charging you, but others of them want a price, want to make some additional money off of it. So that can certainly be something that you do on your application. So those are just some of the different tips and tidbits that are out there. I would just say be detailed and thorough and have a clear vision. Think about how this can affect all of the students in your district through this learning and what you're trying to accomplish, and think about what are some different benchmarks that I can use to measure my success, and have some different deadlines in place, because you do have a series of questions on there that you have to map out your timeline. I actually kind of like to go there first and do my timeline first before I do some of the other questions, because I think it gives me a better focus for when I write out that narrative. Because I've already thought about, this is what I'm doing these days. And I probably even put way too many nitty-gritty details on those questions. But I think it's nice to have a vision for the time frame for this before you go into saying why it's so important if you already have a plan in place. And I think I only have like one more slide. Yeah, and just think about how you can expand your reach beyond just your learning, how it can touch other people in your district. And even think beyond just certified teachers. So if you go to training and you learn about how to make things accessible, then why not train some of the bus drivers or some of the cafeteria workers on some practices that are applicable to them, or partner with that group so that it's really your whole district benefiting from this learning, not just you. So making a bigger impact. And I think that will help your grant stand out and really be significant when they review it. So if you guys have ideas or things that you're thinking of and you want to share those in the chat, you certainly can. I also wanted to share an idea that I was looking at. So I went to some different conferences this year through this grant, and I'm so thankful for it. But I found some really good content out there from Fried Tech. If you've been to their sessions, they're amazing. They actually have all access memberships that are pretty low cost on here. So I was thinking about writing that into my grant so that some of my teachers, not teachers, but some of my brand new instructional coaches, because we've had some new ones this year, can get access to some of this stuff. Some of the people who've been in my district for a little bit have gone through Google certification. They did it with me years ago, but some of them are new and they still want to do these things, but kind of at their own pace. So being creative is an option for you, and thought I would share an idea that I had here that I was digging into in my district. But if you have ideas, you can certainly let us know. Our emails are on the screen. If you want to stay on for a few minutes and share in the chat or just talk, that works for me. That works for Ryan. I didn't necessarily ask if that was cool with you. I just kind of said it. So.
No, it is cool with me. I did want to just throw out there, does anyone have any questions or comments, you're free to unmute and throw anything out there before we start to wind down. Thank you, Carissa.
He's so sweet all the time. Thank you.
I love you guys. We should just do this every day if we could have this built in time. I love the book study. So I did want to share, I don't know if anyone, bringing in people in person is awesome, but as part of the digital learning grant that I wrote for our district, I wrote in a book study with Matt Miller for the AI for educators. And then like Brenny, when I was talking to you about the PJPD, I was like, instead of bringing him, what if I could get him to come on for like 3 virtual sessions during that time? And we chunk the book in 3 pieces, and he comes in for an hour virtually. And then, if 500 people wanted to show up, they could show up. So anyway, we'll see how that goes with the grant. But if someone else wanted to use that same idea and get someone to come in virtually to meet with teachers, like beyond the 4 p.m., maybe when they're more ready to learn later in the day, hopefully we get it. I'm so excited, but just another idea.
I really like that idea.
I love that.
For lots of reasons, not only for the ease of getting this, on the speaker's schedule, but making it more accessible to those who want to participate. That's fantastic.
Well, and to all our staff, right? Like you were saying,
Yeah.
I don't care if an assistant comes and wants to, like, the more people we can educate, great. We can record it so people can watch it later if they can't attend. Um, so if that works for anybody else, take that
Mhm.
idea for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Carissa. Any other ideas or questions? Okay. Well, Brenny, thank you so much for all of that information. It's just fantastic. And this reporting will be available to watch back or share with others almost immediately following this. So, Brenny, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. And our contact information is right there. If you need anything else, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.